Hey everyone, welcome to Buick Outdoors. If you're new around here, my name is Sheldon Marion, and a little while ago I filmed a video where we were doing some cooking out in the woods, and one of the things I had with me was some beef lard that I made at home, and since then I had a lot of people asking me how to make it. So on today's video, we're going to be in the kitchen here today, and I'm going to show you how to make your very own beef lard. So before we start this off, I'm going to go through the little list of things that you need. Obviously you need some beef fat. This year I picked it up from my local butcher shop called the Butcher Block. This big bag was $6.15. It's about $1.70 a pound, so roughly 5 pounds of beef fat. Here we got some canning jars that we'll be using. Once it's all done, you need somewhere to throw all your stuff. A couple of jelly bags, and that's just to strain it out before we jar it up, just to get rid of any extra little bits and stuff. And then just one big pot for us to render everything down on. So now that we have our list of things that you need, what we'll do is we'll get the pot on the stove and we'll get this going. So one thing that you might want to do before starting this off is you want to cut this down into kind of manageable pieces, about 1-inch cubes or so. Also, if there's any really big chunks of meat, you're gonna want to cut that off too. Like this isn't too bad like that. But if there's any really big pieces, you want to take that off, because in that way you'll be actually rendering the fat, not cooking the meat, kind of a deal. So this stuff here, I just cut it roughly into kind of 1-inch chunks. And you don't have to do this, it just makes rendering a little bit easier. So we got our little 1-inch pieces, or roughly 1-inch pieces. Some are much bigger like this. And we're just going to go ahead and fill up our pot. And basically once I have all this cut up and in the pot, I'll show you our next step here. Alrighty, so now that we have all of our fat in the pot, what I do is something that's a bit controversial, and that's I add water into it. And I don't add a whole lot. Pretty well just enough to generate a little bit of steam when it starts to cook. About that much. So, just barely any water in there. And basically what that's for is when the water heats up, it kind of generates some steam, and then that way the steam kind of starts to render the fat instead of kind of torching the fat and burning it. But now that we have this on here, we're simply just going to turn this on, and we're going to turn it down to about a 3 or a 4, and essentially just kind of leave it, let it do its business here for the next few hours basically. Yeah, once this water starts to heat up and steam and boil a little bit, I'll come in and I'll stir up the pot, and pretty well that'll start the rendering process. Alrighty, so the water just barely started to boil down there in the bottom. So now what we did, we turned it right down to low, and basically just gonna give her one little stir here just to kind of make sure nothing's kind of sticking to the bottom. And as you can see, nothing's sticking. If you don't add water, what'll end up happening is you'll kind of brown your fat a little bit, and then it's not a bad thing. It just makes it so it's not quite as clear in the jar when you're all said and done. But with this here, you can see how the fat is just slowly melting away, and basically with that water in there, it'll just keep that pressure up, and it'll render out enough of that beef tallow that it'll just kind of start to cook in its own juices, and then eventually that water will just kind of steam off the top, and it'll be perfectly fine. So now that we have it going, I'm basically going to set it to low here, and I'm just going to leave it and just let it do its thing. And honestly, the last time I did this, I think it was either 4 or 6 hours to do a big batch like this again. So yeah, we'll come back every so often, we'll give it a stir until basically you're down to pretty well no fat left, and you're basically deep frying cracklings. So yeah, we'll show you that here in just a little bit. Alrighty, so we've been at this for about 3 hours here now, and it looks like we're almost done. So everything's kind of slowed right down. You can see how all the chunks of fat, they're kind of getting almost deep fried, turning into kind of cracklings. So with this, I think we could cook that a little bit longer, but because I'm kind of getting impatient, we're just gonna call this good enough. There's a couple bigger chunks in there that could be cooked down a little bit more, but yeah, I think we're good so far. So anyways, what I'll do is I'm gonna turn the heat off, and this whole time I've had it right on low. So now that we got the heat off, I'm gonna let that cool down a little bit, and in the meantime, I'm gonna grab a couple of our jars here and basically get them rinsed out and cleaned up. And I'm just gonna get those ready to go. Plus we have some cheesecloth. Well, this is a jelly bag, and it's basically the same thing. That's just to collect any of the little bits in there. So any of like the small little brown bits and chunks of fat and stuff like that, it'll get collected in these jelly bags. If you don't have jelly bags, cheesecloth works. If you don't have cheesecloth, a strainer, like a really fine mesh strainer works. Paper towel works, coffee filters, anything like that. Or what you could do as well is you could pull all the chunks of fat out, let that cool down and solidify, turn the heat back on so you melt that little bit of the bottom just to release it from the pan, pull it out because it'll come out in a big sheet, and then just trim off all the stuff that's on the bottom because all the heavy particles will sink down to the bottom. But because we have our jelly bags, we're not gonna do that. But anyways, yeah, this is cooling down. I'm gonna grab our jars here and we'll start jarring this up. So essentially what I've done is I grabbed a little spoon there with the little slots, and I scooped out pretty well all the fat out of this pot, and then I took that fat and I put it into this pot just to make it so it's a little bit easier to control, because now I have one of these jelly bags, and I just put it over my little funnel here. That'll go on one of these jars, and now we'll simply take our pot and dump it in without, hopefully without making a mess. Oop. Drizzled a little bit, but that's alright. And there we go. That's one done. Couple more to go. And just like that, we have 4 jars that are all fairly clear. They're a little bit brown, but pretty well what will happen is we'll throw these into the fridge, and then once they cool down, they pretty well solidify and turn white. So what we'll do is we'll grab our lids, we'll throw them in here, we'll put them into the fridge, we'll let them cool down, and then I'll show you what they look like once they cool down and solidify. Alrighty, so it's been a couple of hours now since we had the tallow into the fridge, and it's turned nice and white. All 4 jars set up real nice. You can see it turns nice and white. Little touch of brown stuff in the bottom, but that's no big deal. It's just kind of cooked fat. With this stuff too, if you leave it in your fridge, I've been told it'll last about a year, but for us around here, this will only last us a couple of months. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. You know, you've seen how easy it is to make up some beef tallow. It's amazing to cook with, tastes great, and yeah, it's an extremely versatile thing to use. But anyways, guys, I hope you liked that. If you did, hit that like button down the bottom, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.